In this week's episode of the Too Fast, Too Fast podcast, we discuss the history and current state of the U.S. shipbuilding and shipyard industry and its impact on the Navy's budget, mission, and future. Then we play some mid-watch games. Let's do it.
Dive! Code red and 4 compartment middle level.
Torpedoes in the water!
No, I never have thought I was smart. I thought the people I dealt with were dumb, including you.
All right, we're back. Episode 4 of the Too Fast, Too Fast podcast. Danny's joining us again this week while he's able to. Amber, get us started. What are we talking about?
So I had some questions from some people who watched the show, and somebody asked me what the ventilation is like underway. She wanted to know what happens when someone farts. Does it just stink forever, or is there actual ventilation?
We breathe in recycled farts. That is literally what happens. People fart all the time.
No. Come on. Not
That's what
so
we do.
Okay, in the engine room, we do. There's filters all over the boat. Specifically, one location has very high quality filters. But I will say, in the engine room, here's a little sea story. You could go to a certain filter.
Hang on.
Sea story. Here we go.
Once upon a time.
And one time at band camp,
what happens?
Get ready.
Petty officer, will you tell me a sea story?
All right, sea story. Let's hear it.
Yeah, right. So one of our greatest friends, Clay, noxious gas.
Of course it was Clay.
Yeah, but there was this one specific suction of ventilation that would just pull air in from the engine room and blow it into maneuvering, which is where the guys will sit to control the reactor and electrical plant. And you could definitely put smells into that suction, and it would immediately smell horrible in maneuvering. And he was one who was very prone to doing that, just going right there and just laying one on maneuvering.
There was also
you start gagging.
There was a small group that would get you with field day bombs too, because when everybody was cleaning and you had the shop vacs, you could fart into the suction of a shop vac and point the exhaust at an enemy, and it would just blow your fart straight out.
My god!
So you just be deep in an outboard or a build somewhere, and then all of a sudden you just get hit with a shit smell, and someone's laughing above you.
This is just great minds.
That's right.
Well, I guess to slightly answer the question, though, it smells regardless.
Yeah, it smells bad.
Especially that first day.
Yeah.
When they start pumping in all the amine and whatnot, and then before you become desensitized to it, and you just stop noticing. But then once you get out,
that's the worst.
Everybody knows. Everybody can smell you because you your clothes. It gets on your clothes, and it just.
When you carry your sea bag home from an underway, I mean, it is toxic.
Yeah.
Hang on. As an outsider, I kind of liked that smell.
There you go. I knew this was coming.
Because that just meant you were gone, now you're here.
Yeah.
Type of thing.
If I smelled it again, I would probably reminisce about the smell. But when
I reminisced about the smell about 2 or 3 days ago when I was doing inventory on marine uniforms. They have a insect repellent embedded into their uniform that stinks so bad amine.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah,
that's a really good idea.
On the modern boats, that's not really a problem, but on all the LA class, it's a huge problem, and it always will be. I remember, so I was 3MC last year, and I went to one of the production meetings with the squadron. And
can you explain what 3MC is real quick?
It's a essentially maintenance material manager, but you're controlling the coordination with the shipyard or intermediate maintenance facility and the ship. So you're like, if we have guys doing work off hull or we need coordination with guys that are working shore based, we need their help. The 3MC is the main coordinator of that. So
what's going on with my camera?
I have no idea. I see.
Hang on, keep talking. I'm going to unplug and plug back in.
But we had a guy, prior Navy guy. He was an officer. He's probably in his late 50s, early 60s now. But I went into his office just to get a DFS signed. And he walked up next to me to sign this piece of paper. And he's like, "You smell fucking horrible. Like, what is like that is the real OG LA class submarine." I was like, "Yeah, man, I don't even know." So like, "Do you shower?" I'm like, "Bro, come on." Of course. What the hell is this?
Yeah, you think I'm trying to smell like this, homie?
Okay, I think that's a good next question. What is showering and like general hygiene like underway?
If you take longer than 10 minutes, I'm gonna cut the water off on you.
Oh, we talking about showers?
Yeah.
I will turn the hot water off on you because I don't want to start the reverse osmosis unit up.
Well,
What was the full question? Sorry, I didn't. What was the question?
What's it like underway when you're showering and like just general hygiene in general?
Well, it's very small.
Yeah, so I guess to actually answer what Jimmy is trying to say, so the cool thing about showers on LA class for general population, it's like teeny tiny. Like if your arms hang down by your side, you will touch the walls, and you don't want to touch the walls. That's like rule number one. But also you can control the water flow to them outside of the shower.
Oh.
So like someone brushing their teeth, just like, especially if you're a mechanic, like that motherfucker's been in there too long. You can just reach right up and you can just turn that shit off. Like it's literally a valve that's right above your head, and you just shut it. Boom. They can't take water or take a shower no more.
Yeah, so you have to turn that on before you go in?
It's normally open. It's just that people realized, oh, hey, the water control valves are right there. So if you're like, hey, motherfuckers, stop hogging up all the water, you can just turn it off and they get forced.
Ooh, that looks like looks like Av Cruz Berthen's shower.
It is, but I don't think the door's open.
So showers, though, they drastically change depending on what you're doing. So like if you're just in local ops training, you just take a normal shower, keep the R units running all the time because there's no reason not to. But then like you go on deployment and then there's times where like, hey, you can't shower this week.
You will not shower. Yep.
Yeah. Well, funny. So.
And it's potent,
And like brushing your teeth, you can't do that either.
You brush your teeth.
All.
It's just everything except showers. It just takes too much water. Mikey, ironically, he was the stinkiest of all feet.
Yes.
And every time you'd walk into Mikey's corner, you could just smell his feet when we weren't able to shower consistently.
And he knew too.
Yeah, he did. But it was like when you had periods of time like that, it was definitely like, God, this sucks.
There is no pictures. I was going to pull up a picture to show, but there is no pictures of a submarine shower.
Funny you say that, Danny. So when I went on deployment, right, without y'all, and being that Jimmy is a prior mechanic, mechanics run the reverse osmosis units, the RO units, that make water, right? So it's the nuke mechanics' jobs to make water for the whole ship. So that's why it's a little, like, nukes are a bit more sensitive to the idea, right? But when we were on deployment, for that first half, 3 straight months of just sitting there doing fucking nothing, we were telling people, like, take longer, because I don't want to keep turning the RO units off. We would fill it up. We would fill every tank up in like a single shift and then turn it off and then immediately turn it back on like an hour later. And all our pumps were...
you're turning it back on just to top it off.
Yeah. For like very minimal use. But all of our seals were leaking and the pumps were getting fucked up. So we almost rehauled the entire RO units. And we're like, all right, guys, just do whatever the fuck you want. We don't give a shit. I don't want to keep turning these things on and off.
Yeah, we call
that a Hollywood shower.
Yeah.
So like the difference is there's a submarine shower, which is like you turn the water on, you get your body wet, you turn the water off, you lather up in soap, you turn the water back on, wash it off, and do whatever you got to do next.
And the best part about it is it works just like your home shower, where you turn it off, You soap up, you turn it on. It is ice cold for about 5 seconds. And then it finally warms up in time for you to turn it back off again.
Because the alternative, if like one, we're low on water, or two, the R units are broken, you do water conservation, which is kind of what they were talking about earlier, where you hang these red tags everywhere where you're like, don't fucking take a shower, don't flush toilets, don't do anything at all involving water. Just do the minimal that you have to do and then fucking go to bed. Right?
The no flushing thing is crazy. The no flushing thing when they get ready to blow sands or pump sands or anything with sanitaries and they're like, don't flush. It's crazy. That's all I'm gonna say about it. It's crazy.
Do you leave port with like water reserves, or is it like ocean water that you're filtering?
You normally try to you will fill potable from the shore.
That's right. When you're in
or
port,
a shore facility,
you have a truck come give you water.
Yeah.
But when you're underway, you filter ocean water.
Yeah, but you normally won't start it up until probably 8 or 16 hours after you pull out. That way you're like away from import, so you're not pulling in a whole bunch of nasty shit. Because if you just turn on the R unit import, you're gonna fuck up everything in sight.
Yeah, you're gonna suck in the trash and waste and whatever else is in the pier side water.
Yeah, and it's gonna make a ton of work for the mechanics, and I don't want to do that shit.
Any other? These are fun questions.
I have one more. Somebody had asked about like the pressure of going down. Like, do you get a headache?
It's totally equalized.
Yeah, you don't feel it.
Even when you dart down and just go deep.
You hear it.
You hear it.
You hear
creaking. It. You hear the submarine creaking. The hull does kind of squeeze in, and you can feel the angle, but it's not like an airplane.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
The first time you hear it, freaked me out.
After when we left shipyard and we were doing sea trials, so what they replace a whole bunch of stuff on the hull, and you have to certify that you can still go to the depth that you're certified to go to. It is scary because things are creaking that haven't creaked in 20 years, and it's like, I mean, you're bracing for flooding. You're like, I know this is not going to work because I saw the quality of shipyard work that just happened, and here we are,
and
X hundreds of feet.
Holes like that thing.
Yeah. And so you're on watch and you're like, this is probably going to be the end.
Oh my gosh.
Because the first time I ever went underway, I was on nights. So I was asleep when we dove. I just remember I went to sleep. We were on the surface. I woke up. We were very underwater. I'm not going to say the number. We were very much underwater. And then at the end of my shift, we came up. And I was in cruise mess eating. And I heard the hull expanding, and the bulkhead in cruise mess would also expand, and that freaked me the fuck out. Like the EXO was right next to me, and he's like, "Don't be a bitch."
Yeah, so you definitely do get the pressure changes, though. It's just different. So when we have high pressure air compressors to compress air to put into our air banks, which we use to emergency blow to go back to the surface if we needed to in an emergency. But you'll go to sleep sometimes and they'll do an air charge or a 2 compressor air charge, and you'll wake up and you're just clogged up and you can feel it immediately.
The air that those compressors use comes from the people space. So you're drawing a suction, or you could draw a suction on the regular atmosphere.
Yeah. Correct terminology is two-banger. Man's two-banger.
Yeah.
Two-banger.
Two-banger. Yeah. Good times. I'm just starting those things up.
And it's called that because they're loud as fuck.
I lifted a relief once and I thought I was dead.
Yeah, that's just scary. Yeah.
Somebody didn't open the stop valve.
You mean somebody didn't open the procedure?
Yeah.
I thought I knew how to do it. Dude, yeah. I got in a lot of trouble with the high packs. I was never removed from watch, probably because I was too critical to the watch bill. But
so this is a story for a different time, but at least you didn't start up the high pressure air dryer, which ETs
that's true.
Never do.
Never made that mistake.
But a certain buddy of ours definitely did.
Oh my god!
And got removed for that shit. I don't actually know his first name. and we're not saying last names, but
That's right.
You know, the Minecraft dude.
He tried to start up the high pressure air dryer.
Oh, I remember when he did that.
He did. No, he didn't try to.
His name is
You
Jacob.
don't remember that, dude?
Yes, yeah.
No, I don't remember that.
Oh, yeah, it's because, well, realistically, it's because M did a bunch of crooks in the.
Yeah, so
no.
Hang on. Just a little bit of context. Underway, reactor control division, for some fucking reason, starts up the high pressure air compressors, which are very much not a reactor system. It's very mechanical. The high pressure air dryer is a whole separate system that is not in a space that we even own. So we would never even touch it or see it on watch. And someone in my division, who happened to be my CSUN, apparently decided to start that up instead of a high pressure air compressor.
You know why that stands out so much in my mind, right? Is because on September 12th, for those of you guys who know what that day is and what it means to me, I had 2 critiques that day, and one of them was because old Jakey Poo decided that he was going to not know how to start this thing up and almost destroy it. But in the meantime,
course he didn't know.
Yeah, but so that's not the problem. MDiv, meanwhile, the PM880, the thing that detects humidity, the dew point, it hasn't worked forever.
Right.
It never works.
They're not telling anyone because they're MDiv. That's rule number 1 on submarines: is mechanics will fuck you, right? So they don't tell anyone, and then he does it because he's like, yeah, nobody else is around. So he's like really trying to like help out,
right?
But he gets screwed because that procedure is terrible. That piece of equipment is like confusing as shit. And so my birthday that year was spent.
Is the high pressure air dryer also an SSM procedure?
Yes.
So ship service manual, which
Yeah.
we don't have time to get into the nitty gritty, but basically those procedures are all much worse than the ones we're used to using.
Yeah.
I just want to say you were either misremembering it, but what I most remember from this whole story was a certain mechanic.
I know who you are,
first
Joe.
class, who eventually got kicked off our boat. I'm sure y'all know. Taught him how to do it, and then told him to do it. He did not make the decision on his own. Someone told him it was okay to do that, so he did.
That sounds a lot like Wally. Was that Wally?
Yes.
Okay.
He taught him how to turn it on.
Of course he did.
He's doing good now. I'm proud.
I'm
happy for him.
I don't care.
I don't care.
He just wasn't supposed to be on a.
I saw he was doing good on that dating app too. So like, moving on.
Okay. I guess we'll transition to the meat of this thing. Our main story this week is about U.S. shipyards and shipbuilding. It's been a hot button issue for the Navy because of fiscal year 25 budget testimony to Congress. So I put together a little PowerPoint about U.S. shipyards and shipbuilding, specifically kind of painting the picture of how we got to where we are. So we start all the way back in World War II. So in World War II, the worldwide shipbuilding industry boomed because the Allies had to replace all the merchant ships and naval ships that they lost. And then they had to design and build battleships and submarines to compete with U-boats, which were absolutely fucking them up. Post-World War II, the U.S. had 8 naval shipyards and at least 64 private ones. 40 of them were spun up by the Navy or Maritime Commission during the war. The countries I
don't want to cut you off, but just so we can paint a picture on like what the U.S. economic machine is capable of. We produced 288 submarines in 5 years
during World War II.
During World War II,
that's fucking amazing.
288.
Which is the size of our
Portsmouth Naval Shipyard commissioned 3 ships on the same day.
That's the current size of the whole fleet.
Yes.
So the countries whose shipyards were bombed heavily in the war, specifically Japan, Germany, France, and Italy, immediately went to work post-war, rebuilding and modernizing all of their lost shipbuilding capability. So soon the U.S. was way behind other shipbuilding nations technologically because their shipyards were unaffected by the war. So there was a stagnation of innovation and growth. And Navy and private shipyards scaled back operations or converted from shipbuilding facilities to repair facilities. and all but 2 of the World War II emergency shipyards were closed down completely. By 1950, there was almost no work for the U.S. shipbuilding industry. The Korean War, which normally, a war would cause the military-industrial complex to kick into overdrive. The Korean War didn't require any new ships because the Navy had 1,000 already. So in 1955, the USS Nautilus is launched, which is the first the first nuclear-powered U.S. submarine. And within 1 year of that, there were 14 nuclear submarines, 1 nuclear cruiser, and 1 nuclear carrier, all planned and purchased for shipbuilding. By 1956, Japan, who had largely had their shipbuilding industry destroyed in the war, was already the #1 shipbuilding nation in the world. And it was in large part due to an American company called National Bulk Carriers that leased them a shipyard that Japan then replicated and streamlined throughout the entire country by using standard designs and specializing in only 1 or 2 of them per shipyard. So each shipyard was very good at pumping out 1 or 2 types of ships, and they were just manufacturing them very, very efficiently. Then in 1956, the next big impact in U.S. shipbuilding was the Suez Canal closing. So the Suez Canal is pictured there up in the top of Africa. But all the Saudi Arabian and Middle Eastern oil would go through the Suez Canal and then exit through the Med to get to the U.S. and the U.K. But that was closed in 1956. So then tankers had to go all the way around Africa, around the Cape of New Hope. So it required worldwide shipbuilding to spin up and produce these gigantic tanker ships so that they could minimize the number of trips. So the tanker fleet worldwide grew by 400%, and each one got 4 to 5 times bigger. So they were just making these massive tankers. The U.S. shipyards that could produce those new giant tankers flourished in the late 1950s and early 60s. So that was a little boom in U.S. shipbuilding. And then in the 1960s and 70s, we had SecDef, so Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara, shifted most warship production to private establishments like Newport News, Groton, and Portsmouth, largely in response to political problems that the Vietnam War was causing. So they were trying to sort of deflect the military-industrial complex from being a problem by toning down naval shipbuilding and giving it all to private yards, which did exactly the opposite. They closed the Brooklyn Navy Yard in 1966, and San Francisco Navy Yard was closed down in 1969. So those are 2 of the actual naval shipyards. In 1968, President Nixon expanded the Merchant Marine Act of 1936, which boosted private yards even further. There was so much private sector work making cargo and passenger ships. And now, because of the expansion of the Merchant Marine Act, they were also making tankers and dry bulk carriers subsidized by the government. The Navy couldn't find anyone to build warships because there was more money in producing the tankers. But they were badly needed at this point because the entire World War II fleet, which was gigantic, was becoming totally obsolete. In 1972, there was a report published recognizing that private sector shipyards were up to 40% more efficient or cheaper than Navy yards. And so they immediately said all new construction will happen at private yards. There will be no Navy yard construction. Following that, the Boston Navy Shipyard was closed in 1974. 1973 was another big milestone for U.S. shipbuilding. The OPEC oil embargo caused oil prices to spike and demand to drop. Facilities worldwide that were booming from the production of these big tankers had no work. It was so dramatic that a lot of the big tankers that were being built at the time were immediately sent to long-term layup facilities, never to be finished. They were like, this is not going to happen. The U.S. was still producing large numbers of cargo ships, tankers, and container ships, but increased production of offshore drill rigs and supply boats for the offshore industry was the major shipbuilding thing. They were building offshore drill rigs. Also in the 1970s, the DoD adopted a short war mindset. So they believed in the 70s that any new age war would be short and intense and either rapidly de-escalate or escalate into exchanging nuclear weapons. They're like, there's not going to be any long-term war. Either we're going to nuke each other or we're going to just defuse the situation. And so we don't need a very big fleet because we're not going to have to fight a long-term war. Additionally, to support that new mindset, in World War II, they had shipyards, a whole bunch of shipyards operating below peak capacity so that they could spin them up all to peak capacity and then pump out a bunch of ships left and right. But then they pivoted and decided to only have a few shipyards working at peak capacity all the time because they didn't need a very big fleet. Obviously, that was a mistake, which carries to today. Additionally, because of that short war mindset, defense spending was reduced and the fleet size went from over 1,000 to less than 500 in the next 10 years. So it halved in 10 years. Shipbuilding companies were able to pump out Navy ships, though, because there was no tanker work, right? They weren't producing the tankers or the cargo ships or anything. And so they were able to pump out a bunch of Navy ships, but the DoD was like, we don't need them. So they were not utilized at all. They had a bunch of capacity that was not being used. And then skip to the 80s, the early 80s, Reagan comes in. So in 1981, Reagan cut the Merchant Marine Act, including removing guarantees for financing of flagships to U.S. shipyards. At this point, the offshore industry had basically dropped completely. There was no demand for offshore oil and gas, and we had overbuilt the inland fleet, which was funded. It's basically like a housing boom, but for the shipbuilding industry. So a whole bunch of companies were able to get really easy financing because there was a whole bunch of oil off the shore. And then a whole bunch of those companies couldn't pay their debt because the demand for that oil dropped. And so the U.S. shipbuilding industry almost collapsed entirely. By 1986, employment fell by 33%, and the number of active yards was reduced by 40%. At this point, Korea and China start spinning up their shipbuilding powers because they can make ships for a fraction of the labor cost of every other country. So Korea and China at this point are able to just super overproduce every other country. But Reagan was a 600 ship fleet president. So he wanted 600 ships in the Navy fleet. So even though that the U.S. shipbuilding industry was decimated, there was a whole bunch of Navy ships that had to be built. And there was a ton of intense competition to get those government contracts. So much so that it drove 3 major shipbuilders completely out of business and brought the total number of shipyards down to 6. All right. And then late 80s through 90s. So the big tankers that were manufactured in the wake of the Suez Canal closure were coming due or past due for their 20-year inspection, and they were not passing them. So every single ship needed this gigantic overhaul to be able to pass their inspection that came due. And so there was this anticipation of a big boom in the shipbuilding industry to overhaul these giant tankers. Couple that with the 1989 Exxon Valdez oil spill, which was 11 billion, I think either 11 million or 11 billion barrels of oil spilled into the ocean. There was a whole bunch of new legislation for these tankers also. And so the U.S. was anticipating this big boom in the shipbuilding industry. But then the Gulf War happened. So in 1990, the Gulf War was happening, and there was not really any shipbuilding happening because no one knew what the outcome of the Gulf War was going to be or what it would cause long term. So most countries in the world spun down all their shipbuilding capabilities, except Korea and China. Korea and China were like, we don't care. We're going to keep pumping these things out and modernizing all of our shipbuilding facilities. Hyundai gets involved in Korea and just makes these gigantic, super efficient shipbuilding plants. And foreign countries were like, hey, tone it down. You're going to screw up everything in the worldwide economy. And they didn't care. At this point, so after the Gulf War, the U.S. shipbuilding industry did make a recovery, but it was minimal because Asian shipbuilding was so much better and so much cheaper. And then we dropped down to 5 major shipyards. Jump to the 2000s. So in 2000, Korea replaces Japan as the worldwide leader in shipbuilding, which I think they still are today. It might be China. But they have them. So Korea, Japan, Germany, Poland, and China all have new modern shipyards. And the norm across the world is government subsidies for these shipyards. The U.S. got a bunch of these companies together, or these countries together, and said, hey, let's stop subsidizing the shipbuilding industry so that every country can compete on a level playing field. And they got every single other country to agree. And then the U.S. said, never mind. And the U.S. pulled out of the deal. And so then it didn't go through. But still today, the U.S. is one of the only countries in the world that doesn't officially subsidize the shipbuilding industry. And obviously, they're way behind because of it. And then through mergers and buyouts, all the U.S. shipyards become owned by only a few companies, which is the current state. The total active ships in the Navy steadily decreased from 1999 to 2014 and end up 19 ships short of their ultimate goal in 2014. So they had 289. The goal was 308. In 2016, Trump takes office and he increases the goal of Navy ships to 355. Everyone endorsed that goal, but then it completely fell apart. The strategy and money did not support a 355 ship fleet, and it didn't include any unmanned ships. So they weren't in the conversation at all. No one knew if that was part of the 355 or in addition to. It just wasn't part of the conversation. The fiscal year 2020 30-year shipbuilding plan calculated their spending at approximately $24 billion a year to get to 355. But then the Congressional Budget Office calculated a cost of $31 billion per year. So they were like, it's not going to cost you 24. It's going to cost you way more than that. And then they said that was 50% larger than the Navy's average funding for shipbuilding over the past 5 years. And so that was basically a no-go. However, no plan ever replaced the 355 ship plan. So that is still technically like the plan until the Biden administration takes over, because even though they knew it wasn't going to work, they couldn't come up with anything else. At this time, China caught up to the U.S. in terms of ship count and drastically upscaled their ship producing capabilities, which we'll get to when Congress talks about it in a few minutes. So in May of 2018, in response to that, the Navy established the Shipyard Infrastructure Optimization Program, or SIOP, which was to be led by NAVSEA. And to help reach the goal of the larger Navy to get to 355, they considered extending ships' lifetimes by 5 to 19 years, despite a historical and current trend of retiring a bunch of ships early. They're like, we'll just extend them all almost 20 years, and that'll be fine. In 2020, the government was so upset with the Navy's ability to actually produce a shipbuilding plan that the Secretary of Defense, Esper, took over the development of the force structure plan for the Navy and produced a very undetailed plan of 500 ship plus fleet, including unmanned vessels, and said it would, quote, reach 355 traditional battle force ships prior to 2035 with an annual cost of $28.5 billion, which that is just fiction. Like, that was never going to happen. And then the GAO, the Government Accountability Office, investigated the 8 most recently delivered ships and found that a total of $8 billion more than the initial cost estimate was required. Each ship experienced cost growth of at least 10%. 3 of them exceeded their initial budgets by 80% or more. Each one of them was delivered to the fleet at least 6 months late, 5 of which were more than 2 years late. And then even with the long timelines, most of the ships had dozens of uncorrected deficiencies that the Navy accepted anyway because they were so late that they needed the capacity. 2021 rolls around and President Biden administration basically pushes the same 355 ship plan as the Trump administration. It was slightly scaled down because it had ranges for ship numbers instead of just a hard, we need this many. And the 2022 fleet size was 296, relatively stagnant. They produced 7 more ships. So there were 7 more ships in the fleet in 2022 than in 2014. So over the course of 8 years, they made less than 1 ship profit per year.
Yeah. So with that if you Google this right now, it'll be really confusing. But that number is for combatant ships,
right?
Because the Navy does have like 400 plus ships, but a large portion of those are not combatants.
Right. They're called battle force ships.
Yes.
Yeah. So the 2023 plan had 3 alternative options. The most aggressive of which got them to 367 ships by the year 2052. There's a chart here. And then this is a key point because Senator Lindsey Graham will bring it up to the Chief of Naval Operations in a few minutes. But on July 18th of 2023, there was a press report that said that the Navy submitted in June of 2023 to the Congressional Defense Committee a congressionally mandated Battle Force Ship Assessment and Requirement Report that called for a future fleet with 381 manned ships and approximately 150 additional unmanned ships. The report has not been formally endorsed by anybody and is still classified, so they're not willing to release it to the public. But no one has officially said, yes, that's what we need. Skip to current day, 2024. Just to set the stage for some of these conversations, the U.S. has more shipyard workers than Japan, so more labor, a higher labor force than Japan, and Japan produces 20 times more tonnage than the U.S., 20 times more with less workers. U.S. labor costs are comparable. They're not significantly higher than Japan or Korea, who both produce almost exactly the same destroyer as the Arleigh Burke class destroyer that the Navy produces, but they do it at half the cost and much faster than the U.S. The Navy says it can't develop a full cost or schedule estimate for their shipyard infrastructure optimization plan until 2025. It was released in fucking 2018 is when they started it. They still don't have a cost or timeline estimate for it because they say all shipyards need to complete a detailed infrastructure plan and identify facility projects, which apparently hasn't happened in 6 fucking years. Less than 40% of ships complete their maintenance availabilities on time, and some repair work has been sent to the new build facilities, so Newport News and Electric Boat and Groton. They started sending them repair work because the repair work is so fucking behind, but they suck at it because they're there to build new ships, not to fix old ships. I pulled a couple of headlines, which I just have the headlines of the articles here. So in February of this year, the headline says Navy will ask for 1 Virginia-class sub in fiscal year 2025 instead of the normal 2. So the plan for the next, I think, 10 years was to ask for and pay for 2 Virginia-class submarines, but for fiscal year 25, it's only going to be 1. And then also in February of this year, the Navy finally awarded a $1.2 billion repair contract for the USS Boise 7 years late. 7 years late, the Boise has been tied to the pier. They got back from their last deployment 9 years ago. They lost their dive cert and have been tied to the pier for 9 years because they couldn't award this fucking repair contract. And then May 7th, so just a couple of days ago, the Government Accountability Office tells Senate that the U.S. shipyards are a major readiness concern. But I have screenshots of the stock prices of General Dynamics and Huntington Ingalls Industries, which own the 2 new build shipyards. Their stock prices have done nothing but fucking go up. They both trade around $260, and they just see an absurd amount of profits. All right. I'm going to pause there. The next couple of things are videos from the fiscal year 2025 defense budget testimony. The first video is a collection of opening statements from the committee chair for defense budgeting, the Secretary of the Navy, the CNO, and the co-chair. I think that's all that's in here, but here we go.
It is imperative that we invest these dollars that we do have in a way that gets the results that we want. I want to highlight a few areas that we need further discussion. In shipbuilding, Secretary Del Toro, you recently concluded a 45-day shipbuilding review and documented serious scheduling delays. The results are damning, and I understand additional studies are now ongoing. I would love to hear about that. It cannot be ignored that programs initiated with expedited expedition authorities apparently suffer from the same cost, schedule, and technical issues as traditional programs do. The Navy is no exception. For example, the extra-large unmanned undersea vehicle was intended to fill an urgent requirement despite fabrication starting in 2019. Here we are in 2024 with no operational assets.
So unmanned vehicle production started in 2019. There's no operational assets still. I just thought that was important to point out because unmanned vehicles is like a huge topic for the shipbuilding plan.
But icing on the cake, and I heard the Navy is planning to sole source the follow-on effort, and that begs the question, what message does that send? So before we entertain enacting new budget acquisition authorities, I want to know how the Navy is going to improve its performance to ensure that the capabilities we invest in actually reaches the hands of the warfighter without wasting taxpayer dollars.
Last month, the Navy reported a sea duty shortfall of nearly 22,000 personnel, on average 13.
I want to pause it there too because I'm going to come back to that point. But last year, there was a sea duty billet gap of 22 fucking thousand people. And we're trying to build a whole bunch more ships. All right, keep that in mind.
Out of every 100 jobs on a ship are unfilled. These gaps at sea are growing worse, so I look forward to your assessment of the impact of the empty sea duty billets on operational readiness and on retention and recruitment. China's Navy continues its explosive growth from more than 370 ships today to 435 by the year 2030, while this budget request results in only 294 U.S. Navy ships in the same time frame, merely a single ship more than today's current fleet. In total, the request includes only 6 new ships for fiscal year 2025. The last time the Navy requested so few ships was more than 15 years ago. It's worth pointing out, as the chairman has, that the bipartisan Navy National Security Supplemental that the Senate passed more than 2 months ago includes more than $3 billion to bolster the submarine industrial base to help address the lengthy delays in both submarine programs.
Okay, so I want to point that out too, because $3 billion of a supplemental budget that was, or a supplemental increase of funds that the Congress passed to the Navy went to basically PSYOP, and they don't even have a fucking cost or timeline estimate for that program. So what the fuck are you spending $3 billion on? Do you even know? That's crazy. Also, Senator Collins is from Maine, and so she has a very heavy interest in making sure Portsmouth Naval Shipyard, which is in Kittery, Maine, does well, because that's how she's going to stay elected.
Well, it's not only Portsmouth, because there's Bangor, Maine, too, which produces the Zumwalt-class destroyers.
Right.
Which
so
is now canceled. There's 2 shipyards in Maine.
Yeah. So she cares a lot that PSYOP happens and is well-funded. But what the fuck are you funding? Like, what are you doing? Even the Navy doesn't know. All right, here's SecNav.
We are investing billions of dollars in the industrial base that supports us, while encouraging them to invest more in themselves at the same time. And as responsible stewards of taxpayer funds, we will enforce accountability to ensure that our sailors and Marines have the platforms and capabilities they need, delivered on time and on budget.
Given the discretionary spending caps prescribed by...
So I cut his opening statements pretty short. A lot of what he talked about was just filler stuff and things unrelated to shipbuilding. But this is now CNO, Chief of Naval Operations.
The Fiscal Responsibility Act and a top-line increase of 0.7%, the Navy had to make tough choices, favoring near-term readiness, investing in our industrial base, and prioritizing our people, while assuming risk in future capabilities. Within this fiscally constrained environment, the budget request fully funds the Navy's top acquisition priority and the most survivable leg of our strategic deterrence, the Columbia-class submarine. In total, the budget request procures 57 ships across the FIDA. And it invests in our foundation, with funding for our installations, for our shipyard infrastructure optimization program, and for the broader defense industrial base, sending a strong signal to our industry partners on the need to increase our capacity to meet the growing demands of the present and the future. As Chief of Naval Operations, I am committed to pulling every lever available to me to put more ready players on the field.
So that's opening statements. Thoughts so far?
Yeah, I mean, they haven't really gone into any specifics on what action is. And this is kind of what I find so often in congressional hearings, is that, like, what action is actually happening? Like, they're going to talk about themes, but they're not going to talk about action, which I find to be very weird. I feel like I'd lead with...
I want to say, as a junior officer, if I was to bring that shit to my captain, he would light me on fire.
Can you say more?
So one of the things I was taught as a junior sailor is when you're in a position of leadership, right? You don't bring problems to the table, right? You bring solutions, right? They're not talking about a solution-based thing or what they're going to attempt to do or what their intentions are or how they're going to remedy the problem.
Yeah,
they're just
so
saying
this is
filler.
SecNav talked about this also. I cut it out, but both SecNav and the CNO, like, so just to be clear, the SecNav, the Secretary of the Navy, and the Chief of Naval Operations report to fucking Congress. Like,
yes,
that's who they work.
Absolutely.
And they both mentioned the fact that last year they passed the Fiscal Responsibility Act, which capped certain spending. And so they are basically saying, hey, we know our fucking plan sucks and doesn't really make sense, but it's your fault because you capped spending. But like, solve the fucking problem. Don't just tell them why you can't. Fix it. Like, government spending is already out of control.
Yes.
You need to make billions and billions and billions of dollars work to make more than one net ship in the next 7 years. That's fucking absurd.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Is like, showed it earlier with South Korea, Japan, and she talked about it with China, where they're doing it for cheaper and they're producing more. And they are producing quality now. And you go back 20 years, they're producing like a subpar product, but now they're competitive. And we've always been kind of the cutting edge in terms of submarines, in terms of aircraft carriers. We have half of them on planet Earth, right? But now these countries are able, they found their manufacturing edge, and they're able to produce more, which is only going to result in maybe a ship product in the short term, in this 10-year period, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, 50 years. Now they're producing top-of-the-line product much cheaper and much faster.
Yep.
Whereas we were like that, and now we've come into this like bureaucratic fucking nightmare where we're no longer able to produce what we were able to. And I talked about it earlier, 288 submarines in 4.5 years. We have produced, what, 10 in the last 10 years? Like that's where we're at.
Yeah, in the last 10 years, we were at 289. I think we're at 294. So we have a net gain of 5 ships fleet-wide in 10 years.
Yep. And even as we've made submarine building easier, right? We've put these things in blocks now where they can basically compartmentalize how they build the ship, right? They do the forward compartment, they can put an extra section in the middle, they have the engine room, right? And you can change these things out. They've made the Virginia class in such a way where it should be easier to build. But
should be.
But
all right, let me go to I'll start with their line of questioning, and I think this is in order. So they were asked about, so the chair of the committee asked them about ship maintenance, specifically surface ships. He didn't get into submarines, but then the co-chair, who is responsible for 2 major shipyards in Maine, asked about submarines. So here's what the Chief of Naval Operations says about issues regarding ship maintenance.
Ship maintenance is one of my very biggest priorities when I talk about getting more players on the field. You know, one way to do that, of course, is to procure new ships, but the other one is to get them in and out of maintenance on time. So we're very focused as we are looking at the ships that are already underway, several of which have been extended, making sure that we work with our shipyards and our planning to be able to get them in and out of maintenance as quickly as they come back. I think more broadly, we're very focused on improving our processes that are related to shipyard maintenance in general. Some of that is making sure that we get our packages locked in about 6 months ahead of time before the ships come back, so we can plan the work ahead of time so we don't have as much growth work or new work once the ship is.
So she says that like it's some fucking new revelation. I mean, that existed when we went to the shipyard.
I was going to say that's what the Navy's been doing. But
that's not a new. It's not a new program to pre-plan the first 6 months of maintenance. The fact that it's only the first 6 months is kind of fucking pathetic. But like when ships pull into shipyard, you already are pre-planning your packages. She's saying this to Congress like that is some new fucking development. It's fucking bullshit.
time frame wise, like where that started was realistically post Thresher, because the Thresher laid out a lot of things in terms of quality assurance of submarines specifically, but it went into surface ships as well. But at that time in the 1960s, laid out a coursework of what it looked like to plan and availability, the quality control in terms of producing the product at the end of the day, and then what you have to do after you get out to make sure that the work we did was actually effective, right?
Right.
So this is a 60-year-old process that we're acting like is new.
It's some kind of innovation, yeah.
It's wild.
All right, let's see what else she has to say.
In the actual availability. The other one is developing, putting in place basically a surface readiness group. It's going to be led by a second tour, a sequential command captain at the 06 level, who will have a team of folks that are very experienced in shipyard maintenance to bring the ships through, help provide that expertise and oversight, along with our NAVSEA counterparts that will be doing that. So again, I think we're starting to see some big improvements in shipyard maintenance for our surface ships and look forward to continuing that progress. We can't take our foot off the gas, and I'm very focused on this.
There we go.
See,
Again,
for me, like from a leadership mentality, right? So one of my, I don't know, you guys probably watched Jocko Willing's podcast, but he wrote a book, Extreme Ownership. And to me, like what I see there is kind of disturbing, where we have a product and it's shit.
Yep.
But we're like somehow trying to find the gold flakes in the pile of shit. Rather than say, this is a pile of shit, we need to fucking fix it. Where am I?
Exactly.
Like, internalize this. How am
right.
I, as the chief of naval operations, fucking up? Because we're not meeting the mark. We're just changing. Like, oh, we're going to be out on, May 10th. But instead of May 10th, we turn it to fucking April 17th of the next year. And we're like, but we changed the date, so it's okay. We met our second day, so it's on time.
But even though that happens, they still don't push it out on time.
The reason why these things occur, right, is because there's no actual ownership in the job, right? These people know that their job is a 4-year period of time, right? So eventually,
do you mean Congress?
No, hell no, not Congress. The chief of naval operations, right? Okay. She knows that she knows it's not her fault.
Yeah, she's tied to a president, right?
She's tied to something, right?
Yeah.
She's tied to her predecessor. He's tied to his predecessor. He's tied to his. It's a chain here, right? Ultimately, she knows that eventually this fire is going to run out. Do I believe that she wants to do the best job she can while she's there? Absolutely. Yeah, I don't think that anybody walks into that seat and says, I'm not going to be the best I can be.
Well, what do you think the reaction would be if a CNO sat down in front of this same panel and said, it's fucking broken, and we have to majorly overhaul our entire mindset when it comes to shipbuilding and ship repair, or we're fucked?
So I think that Congress would freak the fuck out.
Yeah,
because they're a bunch of pampered babies. They need to hear the soft shit.
Can she say that though?
Not really.
We've already seen that.
She can't say that. She can't say that and keep her job.
But I don't even mean like that. Like, I assume other countries have the availability of this video like we do.
Yeah.
So really, she can't say something like that.
Politically,
you can't say that to the rest of the world.
Yeah, that's true.
Right.
You can. That's the problem. You can, and we already have when we did it in the line of recruiting, right? Because our numbers are so low. It is a national crisis.
Yeah,
like
it is.
People don't really think about it, but it's a fucking national crisis.
It's also it's not a secret. The size of our fleet is, they know how big our fleet is.
Yeah. Right. So like the whole idea, and the Navy has this great policy idea of get real, get better, and that's not happening. We're not doing that on a global scale.
They're not getting real.
Hey, let's get real with this.
Right.
Like, we are not able to produce, and it's whether it's the procedures, our SOPs that we have in place, standard operating procedures to get these things done, whether it's the personnel that we have at these places, whether it's the amount of shipyards that we have, but we're not able to produce what America should be capable of producing. And instead of us saying, It's like, oh, we're doing kind of good compared to the dog shit goal that we set last year. Like,
but yeah, and she talks about putting in place a separate leadership team of people that know how to do overhauls. But again, that exists already. Like,
I was about to say that's ISIC.
Yeah,
that is ISIC.
When you're going to a
no, it's not.
It's not dissimilar. When you're going into an availability, they man you up with people who've been there before, or at least they should.
Correct, but there's a massive amount of Navy bureaucracy that's occurring that's preventing this from happening. One of them, and Jimmy, you might be able to talk to this more, but the limited duty officer program. Right now, what happens? A submarine guy. So
this is what happened to us, to be clear.
Yeah, right. So a submarine guy this is Navy wide, but it did in fact happen to us. But a submarine guy now in 2024 will never be attached to submarines again if he becomes a limited duty officer. For those of you who don't know, it's like a chief warrant officer. It's an enlisted guy without a degree who's incredibly high, in-depth technical level of knowledge is incredibly important to Navy sustainment. And now what they're doing is nope, if you're a submarine guy, you're going to the surface because we want to essentially make your portfolio bigger, right? You're going to have this more in-depth level of knowledge.
Be a submarine LDO now?
So if you're a submarine guy, you cannot be a submarine LDO.
What the fuck?
That's nuts.
So that's for that to happen, it's a numbers game, but it's if you're a submarine guy, you have about a 5% chance of being attached to submarines. And we know how important that position is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because how important that one man was for us, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Now.
Yeah. So just to be clear, what she talked about with a leadership team going, working alongside, we had one person fill that role and they were critical.
Yeah.
We had one person that worked alongside our command and they were actually a part of our command, but that's all we had was one guy.
I mean, outside of that, we had
work.
At the yard, you have the crew that's there, and then you have the Lorax, and then you have, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, but they work for the shipyard. They don't work with the ship or for the ship.
So that's also another problem I see, right? Because the nuclear community, we're undermanned, right? We always talk about this. We're undermanned. We're always struggling to keep people in. We're always struggling to get people to join. We're lowering. We recognize, and I think it's acceptable that we recognize that hey, maybe these academic standards are too high. We should more go on a personal standard. But what I think is wrong is there are people, and I'm going to use myself in this, that would be exceptional. And I would far excel. And I know a lot of guys who would far excel at overall submarine maintenance planning. So a boat goes into the shipyard and this guy's only job is to plan that availability. And his job is to coordinate with this entity, whether it's a private or public shipyard. But you talked about it. We have one guy.
Yeah.
So now we have one officer.
And that one guy, that's not his whole job. He also stands engineering duty officer or ship's duty officer, whatever the hell else the submarine wants him or needs him to do. They're not just there to plan maintenance, which is crazy.
Yeah, and that interface. That interface between the ship and the shipyard is so important.
Yeah, so let me play Senator Collins' question about submarine maintenance specifically to follow up on the panel chair's question about ship maintenance.
Admiral, I want to follow up on the chairman's question to you about maintenance and delays. You addressed it from surface ships. I want to talk to you about submarines. The Shipyard Infrastructure Optimization Program, SIOP, and the Ship Depot Maintenance Line item are both well-resourced in the budget request. I support these needed investments in the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard, in Kittery, Maine, and in our other shipyards, because during the past decade, fewer than 1/3 of the Navy's attack submarines have completed maintenance on time.
Hey, we're in that statistic.
Yeah, we are.
Last year, Navy officials conceded that there were nearly twice as many non-deployable submarines as were anticipated because of maintenance or other issues. This is a trend that we simply have to reverse.
So I want to harken back real quick to that headline I pulled, which was about the USS Boise, which finally got their repair contract awarded after 7 years late.
Was this like days ago?
This is days ago. Yeah.
Okay, because I was recently in Virginia, and then that's news.
The Boise is a 688I, which is the same class of submarine we were on. It's a very old but standardized class.
It's pretty baller submarine. It's pretty good.
But here's the thing: the Navy fucking knew that all the 688Is were going to come due for their availabilities, and then had no idea how to execute those availabilities. They had no plan to do it, and then you have a perfectly capable boat tied to the pier with no dive cert for 9 fucking years. It's crazy.
Yeah.
And that's a fully manned ship.
Yeah.
People get orders to that boat and never leave the pier.
And that's that's such a problem because it ties, I think the shipyard, how the shipyards are going right now ties very, very tightly to retention and getting people to join. So we talked about it in the past.
From a Navy standpoint or from their perspective?
From Navy standpoint.
Okay.
And so you'll get a guy, and we really don't do people good when we send them to a boat like the Boise. Or
exactly.
To a boat like the Hartford. These boats that are sitting in the shipyard, right?
Yeah.
So it's incumbent on those boats to actually somehow turn not being a warship into somehow developing a guy technically, which is hardest. It's very hard to do.
Yeah, I mean, they're all going to go ride another boat. That's what's going to happen. And they have to do that.
But then that just ties into now. So we already have a problem with productivity by the shipyards and contracts. And I have something to bring up later about Rickover's statement to the Comptroller General. And I want to say it was 1975, but where, yes, we have an issue with the shipyards, and now we're developing a very inherent issue with Navy personnel.
Exactly. Yeah. Because they're not going to know what the fuck to do.
Exactly. Yeah. So now, these guys show up to the Boise, and now they've been tied to the pier for 8 years, and then they're going to go to sea, and now you have a bunch of guys who have no fucking idea what they're doing.
That's
because
right.
they've never had the opportunity to do it.
Yeah, and that doesn't mean they don't know how to fight a war. That means they don't know how to operate a fucking submarine, let alone fight a war.
Yeah. And I think this whole issue is tying into much deeper problems. So
yeah, we're going to get to a lot of that.
Why aren't boats like that retired? And
because
so the new ones can be built.
It's so capable.
Okay,
and it's also super capable still.
Well, that's a good question, actually. The problem is that the facilities that repair the boats don't build them. So only 2 places build submarines: Norfolk, which is Huntington Ingalls Industries, and Electric Boat in Groton. Those 2 facilities don't do any repair work. The repair work is done in Pearl Harbor, Washington State, Portsmouth Naval Shipyard. Is that all of them? Did I miss one? Yeah, Pearl.
Hawaii.
Yeah, so the repair shipyards are separate from the new construction shipyards, and they both have problems, but they're separate problems. And so the repair issue is so bad that they started sending repair work to the new build shipyards, and they are horrible at it. They take even longer because that's not what they do.
But if the point is to build new ships, why are we holding on to old ones?
That's kind of a separate problem, is that the point is not to build new ships. It's to artificially pump up the number to compete with China so that our fleet looks big and imposing and powerful.
Well, I think also,
that being said, those private shipyards did used to do overalls. They used to do those.
Yeah, they did. And the repair yards used to build boats too. Like Portsmouth used to produce submarines.
Yeah, right. So, and that was another thing that Rickover talked about is cut the private shipyard out.
Yep.
Make it not exist.
We will get to that later.
He said this in the 70s, right? But so it's just what I see as an issue is, hey, why did we stop doing that? If Rickover saw that as a problem, why did we stop doing it for 20 years? And then oh shit, we're in crisis mode now. We need to make it happen. And we're expecting results from a company that can't really produce the results because they have to learn along the way. That's kind of a crazy expectation to me.
Yeah. What were you going to say, Joe?
I think the other side of the answer to the question what Amber was asking is, what did you say earlier? In 8 years, we produced 7 ships?
We were 5.
5, yeah.
That's not how many we produced. That's how many we gained. So we.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry. We had a net gain.
That's right.
Right. But what that is also implying is there were ships that were retired. So we are, 1, barely staying afloat in the number we have now, but 2, adding to it. And every time you retire a ship, you're making the hill that much steeper, right? So it's the Navy is incentivized to make ships last as long as possible.
Yeah.
To, like you're saying, I guess artificially increase our numbers, as in reach the highest peak we can before we absolutely say this ship must be retired. No fucking questions asked.
Well, yeah, and a bunch of
but
ships
now
get
we're
retired
spending
early.
all that money on a ship that like we could just build a new one with that, right?
Well,
Like, I don't really understand why we would spend 9 years waiting for money when you could have just built a new one in the meantime. And then all those people that you're worried about filling billets with elsewhere, put them elsewhere instead of doing pretend Navy work.
Well, there's a whole bunch of political problems with that. Number one is that it's not necessarily a funding problem, because when the Navy has repair work that has to happen, they put out into the ether this repair contract. And then all the companies that are able to do it have to bid on it. And then once those bids are submitted, they get reviewed. And then the Navy, if they have one that they want to go with, finally awards that contract. And so that final piece is what took 7 years late to actually happen. But the reason that you can't just send all the people away is because they still treat it like an operational submarine, even though it isn't. You still have to constantly man all the watches. They probably still did like pretend underways called fast cruising, where they're tied to the pier, but they act like everything is underway. But it's a whole bunch of like dumb political bullshit, coupled with the fact that these shipbuilding facilities and ship repair facilities are absolutely ass and are way, way, way fucking behind. So they probably couldn't even bid on the contracts to begin with. And there's only a couple of shipyards. And so if they all have this 2-year or 3-year backlog, no one's going to bid on a new job. All right, let me let Senator Collins keep going here.
To what extent, if we make the investments in the budget, can we expect that the submarine maintenance backlog will decline?
So our submarines are our true asymmetric advantage, and we really do need to improve on our overall submarine maintenance. I think 2 things that you mentioned there. So the shipyard infrastructure optimization program, this is a once in a generation, really once in a 100-year overhaul of our 4 public shipyards. We really appreciate the investments in those shipyards because they are so critical to that maintenance that you're talking about. And this is recapitalization of the dry docks. It is a reorganization of the shipyard to ensure that the flow of the work across the shipyard will be effective and more efficient as we're doing that maintenance. And then, of course, upgrading the equipment that is part of that is all part of the shipyard optimization program that we're putting in place. And I think you will really see those investments pay off over many years. These are long projects. And again, we appreciate the investment in that. As far as getting our submarines out of the shipyard on time, we've made a lot of progress in putting in place processes that help us look at the data analytics so we can better understand where are the choke points, what are the barriers to getting our submarines out of maintenance on time, and then working to implement the corrections. We put the head of our submarine force in charge of that overall process last year to really drive the operational demand and understand the sense of urgency that we need in each one of our shipyards to be able to get them out on time. One of the other things we found was that a shortage of supply parts and a rotatable pool.
Okay, that part doesn't really matter. But she's saying fucking nothing at all. I mean, she didn't really know what to say, but looking at the data analytics to figure out where the choke points are, like they don't even know what the fuck the budget will be for PSYOP. So stop fucking talking about it like it matters. You don't even know what you're going to spend the money on.
Yeah.
That's just like, I'm going to say a whole bunch of nothing as rapidly as I can. Yeah, exactly.
It sounds good, right? Like that's what I mean. Like this is you coming to the skipper and being like, "Hey, I got this problem, sir, but let me smear all this fucking smoke and mirrors around it.
Yeah.
And pretend like I know what the fuck is going on."
That's what I feel like is kind of embarrassing to me. And
yeah,
talking back to extreme ownership, like the problem is very known. It's not like there is no smoke and mirrors that can cover that up, right?
Yeah.
So like, why are we not being real about the problem? Like, we're not producing fucking results.
Yeah,
like,
and what's so
if
upsetting
I don't come with solutions and produce results, I am failing at my job.
And her answer to how can you ensure that this will get better? Her answer is like, well, we're understanding the problem. What the fuck are you talking about? That's not what she asked you. How are you going to ensure that the $3 billion that you're spending into this vague ass fucking PSYOP program is going to result in a smaller backlog of submarine maintenance? Oh, well, we put Sub 4 in charge of understanding the problem. That's not a fucking answer. What the fuck are you going to do with this money?
I have delegated the responsibility.
Yes, exactly. I'll let you know what my shipmate says when he reports back to me. Fuck off, man.
We kind of already hit on it, and we are doing it, which is why I feel it's kind of weird that we haven't talked about it. But the AUKUS program, you guys know about that?
Yes. So it's more. I think it's more political than shipbuilding, and I get all sides of it. But if you want to talk about it, feel free.
I think it does dive into a solution to part of our problem, and it's not necessarily like, hey, a trilateral companionship between three nations, but it's like the actual production sharing of our program.
Yeah. So just summarize.
Increase the manufacturing capability.
AUKUS
is overall it's a trilateral partnership between the United Kingdom, Australia, United States. To one of the priorities of it is submarine shipbuilding.
Virginia class. We're going to sell Virginia class submarines to those countries.
Specifically, we already have, right? So Australia is producing a United States submarine shipbuilding facility in partnership with the United States. We're going to teach them how to build, operate, and maintain these submarines. And part of that, we're going to get some of them. So they're going to give us some. We're going to do the quality assurance on it, make sure they're up to our standard, and then we're going to have a partnership in which the three nations work together, specifically in the South Pacific, so we can control that.
And that's the key point is that we need that agreement, because if China and Taiwan pop off, Australia is going to be a key fucking player in that whole thing.
Yes. So it's not just dependent on us for this, because you go to the Taiwan issue, and they're the primary producer of semiconductors on the entire face of the fucking earth.
Primary is putting it lightly. It's like 90-something percent.
97%.
Yeah.
92%.
Okay.
92%, right? So like in terms of so that's part of this partnership with AUKUS too, is the development of artificial intelligence, and they talk about it like the quantum computing, quantum theory. So there's a scientific aspect to it, but yeah, so it's a major thing. But it also addresses submarine shipbuilding. But what I see the issue with that is now we're giving another nation we're combining that to to soften the issue that we have within our own nation. So
and this is what I meant by it being a little bit political. It's like, okay, there are reasons that we have this agreement. At the same time, we cannot produce the amount of submarines, Virginia class submarines, that we need as a nation. And yet the plan is still to sell at least 2 of them to Australia off the rip. That's kind of that situation.
So that's where it does get political. It's like, why are we not, instead of investing all this money into this other nation, why are we not producing it ourselves? And that goes back to, fucking 1930s isolationism, which we were a much more successful nation following the Great Depression. But that starts the military-industrial complex where we strive as a nation when we are at war. So it's like this really hard thing to combat.
Yep.
Because economically, we are the top of the world when we're at war.
Yeah. More so. Yeah. Okay. So part of this congressional testimony was the SecNav had just completed a 45-day review of shipyards, and this was the line of questioning about that.
Secretary Littorio, you had a 45-day review of Navy shipbuilding, documented a 3-year delay in the new frigate program, 2-year delay in the latest aircraft carrier, 2 to 3 year delay in the Virginia class attack submarines, 12 to 16 month delay in the Columbia class submarine.
Okay, I just want to jump in. 2 to 3 year delay in Virginia's, which is the newest, best fast attack submarine class, and a 12-year-long delay in Columbia class submarines, which I would argue is really the only fucking class of submarine that actually matters. Because for the uninformed, the Columbia class submarine is replacing the Ohio class, which are our ballistic missile submarines, aka the submarine fork of the nuclear triad, which is how they call it the survivable leg of the nuclear triad. But the Columbia class submarine will carry our nukes and will launch our nukes in the event of a nuclear war from the ocean.
More importantly, strategic nuclear deterrence. Their existence and their stealth is so important because they're never known where they are.
Yeah. So I think inarguably our most important and most strategic leg of the nuclear triad currently has at least a 12-month delay in production, which is fucking crazy. All right, here's the rest.
This is despite unprecedented support by Congress. Headlines and delays like this should constitute a full-blown emergency for the Navy and the shipbuilding industry. I know there's no quick fixes, but I have yet to see what either party is prepared to do about it, and to be specific, who's being held accountable. So the question is how do we hold these folks accountable? What do we need to do to make sure these folks understand that profitability in the shipbuilding industry isn't your number one responsibility? It's to get these ships out and submarines and equipment out on time, on budget, the way we need them to keep this country safe.
All right, good. Glad you paused it there because that is the most important fucking question of this entire topic.
Yeah, and I want to pause it there because the Secretary of the Navy doesn't really answer the question. I will play his answer. But here's the thing, and this is the problem with the way that the status quo of the military-industrial complex exists, is the shipbuilding industry, specifically when it comes to submarines, but across the board, their goal is fucking profit. It's not what he said. It's not to produce ships on time and on budget. It's fucking profit. They are run by private companies that are traded publicly, that answer to shareholders. Their goal is profit. They could give 2 fucks about the size of the fleet. Like, their goal is to make money. And I don't know why he would suggest otherwise. I get that he's just a senator, but that is their goal. They are a company.
He's probably got shareholders in it too.
Yeah, he definitely does. He definitely fucking does.
Yeah, so this is why, for those of you who don't know, like, you go back to the father of the nuclear navy and really nuclear energy being harnessed in the commercial sector too, Admiral Hyman Rickover. This is from a report to Comptroller General from Rickover in 1975, and it's a 108-page report, so I'm not going to read a bunch of it, but I'm going to read some very key topics I think that are still really relevant today. So one of them, and I think is probably the most important one of them all, is he wrote, the title of this is Not Tolerating Poorly Performing Contractors. And what he means by that is when companies, so how I'll equate this is, say right now, a construction company contracts a job and they don't perform that job in the allotted time after the date that they say they're going to be completed by, which is usually a pretty generous date. They start getting docked money.
Yeah, this happened when they rebuilt the bridge in Portsmouth.
Yeah, right. So the Sarah Long Bridge on I-95, it goes from New Hampshire into Maine. This happened, and every single day they were docked. It was a massive amount of money.
It was a lot of money,
thousands of dollars, where they ended up losing like $20 million.
Yeah,
major commercial contracting company, engineering company, right? So I think that's a major problem we have today. Is now where we kind of like hinted to it earlier, where when a company doesn't reach their goal, right? So specifically these shipyards, public, it's weird, but when you, especially now when you're diving into the private shipyard realm, doing these overhauls to keep submarines operational, you have these companies that don't meet their marks. They say we're going to do this by this date, and they don't do that. They should be.
And
so we talk about their profits.
They say in this
they
much
keep
money,
going up.
Yeah,
but their work is fucking stagnated. We're going to go at the same line. We're going to be worth more money. That makes no sense, right? So as a nation in general, as a company in any field whatsoever, you have to innovate and you have to improve. Well, now they're stagnating, gaining money. Doesn't make sense, right? So I think that's a really important theme that's going to be really prevalent in the future, that we have to do something about. We have to hold these organizations accountable, whether it's building our new ships or whether it's maintaining our old ships. Like, something has to give. Another one, so this was much more prevalent in 75, but I think it's something that we need to dive into about building new shipyards, which we're working on, I know, but there's no path forward right now. But it's essentially the age-old thing with the government is awarding the lowest bidder. So hey, we may know that this group of people aren't going to produce the results we want, but they give us the lowest number, so pick them. And Rickover talked about that.
That's what's so crazy too, is the government knows that they will go over budget. I mean, it's 100% of the time for the last 8 lead class deliveries, and yet they still choose the lowest bidder. But maybe if you went with a higher bid, that's more fucking realistic. It might be more reasonable to expect them to complete actually on budget, not this moving target.
Yeah, on budget or on time. I think realistically, Navy-wise, on time matters more.
Yeah, you can always charge the taxpayer more money.
Right. So that's we're trying to meet a goal. We're spending $1 trillion in defense in the United States every fucking year. You guys may have heard a quote from Putin where someone asked him would you go to war with the U.S. and it was hilarious. He said it in English. Hell no. We spend 3% of what they spend on defense. It's insane, right? So
we have more airplanes than the next, I think, 7 countries put together.
We have more aircraft carriers than the rest of the world combined.
Yeah.
So our military is gargantuan relative to any other nation on the face of the fucking earth, right? But
except in pure numbers, China's got us beat.
Sure.
And everybody's scared about it.
It was silly.
We'll get to that too.
Right now, but we already talked about their manufacturing capability, and it's incredible. It's what we were in 1944, right?
Yep.
So
exactly.
It's pretty amazing, right?
We had 1,000 ships, dude. 1,000 ships.
Yep.
And they were made.
Bro, it's an elusive number. Iran has more ships than us. One of our ships.
We're going to talk about how the number is not really the end all be all, but
yeah, right. So, and then the last thing I have from this, and like I said, this is a 108-page report, and there's some brilliant topics because Rickover was incredible. We all talk about him like he's the god of nuclear power, right? But he was just a really smart dude.
Yeah.
And he did not there were no substandards to it. But the last thing is deterring work stoppage by stopping payments corporate wide. So why I think that's so important is we dive into this private shipyard, maintenance structure, is that when a shipyard thinks that they have to stop work, or when the Navy stops work because of the shipyard's quality control, that should be a financial deduction, right? If the shipyard is not able to maintain a standard, and I've been on both sides of the fence, civilian and Navy, you have to understand that the shipyard is controlling that environment, so they have to maintain the standard for the Navy at that period, which is it's hard.
I don't know if anyone on this podcast will know the answer to this question. I don't. Who was held responsible when a shipyard worker set the USS Miami on fire?
I thought
the shipyard was held responsible.
But who is that? Isn't that the government?
Correct. That's why it's weird.
Yeah, because the taxpayer is going to pay for that lost submarine.
there was a person who was held responsible.
Yeah,
right?
but only in like corporal punishment, not fine.
Yeah.
Like they don't have billions of dollars.
Like this guy's never going to pay off the $217 million that he owes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
He's almost out of jail.
But the taxpayer, like when the shipyard fucks up, and this is like an extreme case, but literally a disgruntled employee set a submarine on fire, and it was a loss. They lost the submarine.
Yeah,
like that's just oops. We lost the boat. Who sent that guy to jail?
And it was a 688i, so it was a new boat
at that time.
So it's like a very tough conversation because I will tell you that the quality of life on the other side of the fence, it's not.
I know, and it's not. I'm not trying to have that conversation.
Yeah,
we will have that conversation, but I'm just talking about like what you're saying, which is what Rickover said. Like, I don't disagree. But to say that they should be held accountable, well, they, in most of the repair yards, is the government.
Yeah. Right now, realistically, and they're the ones that still somehow produce the best product.
Yeah, true.
Like the private shipyard, normal public shipyard contracted for 24 to 30 months, where a private shipyard is contracted for 54 to 72 months. Like that difference is shocking.
Yeah.
But then, like, you think about,
then it
like,
gets pushed out and then pushed out and pushed.
Yeah,
out.
right. Exactly. So a 54-month, and I'm not going to name any names whatsoever, but like a 54-month can very quickly turn into a 64-month.
Yeah.
Turn into a 72-month.
Yeah. This might be a good time to drop this line, but I was talking to a former electric boat employee, and I asked him, like, why is it so shitty? Why is everything so far behind? And he said he took a day to think about it. And he said, at EB, everything I did when I was working there had to go through some long-ass approval process. His group did testing for the Columbia motor module. So, for example, if he wanted to send out a memo for test sequencing, he needed to have 6+ people sign off on it, ranging from a peer reviewer to a manager or staff engineer, who could take weeks just to look at it and give comments. That process caused massive bottleneck and the work there, and is part of the reason everything takes so fucking long. It's like just admin on admin on admin on admin. Yeah. And we'll talk about this in a little bit, but the reason for that is because the Navy has put itself in this position where they rely almost exclusively on standards and certifications in lieu of some kind of integrated testing program. So it's like, hey, you're certified or you meet these standards. So we don't need to test it anything at all until the end. And we'll do sea trials to give the dive cert and whatever else. But the lack of integrated testing has caused that void to be filled with just standards and certs. And so this one package of work needs to be signed off by 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 people before it can even fucking start.
And we're not innovating in that regard. We're just on set to these rigid standards, and we don't want to improve a process.
If you're going to streamline production, there is going to be some operational risk.
Yes.
That's just the nature of the beast. But at a certain point, if you really need to have 381 manned platforms to be at quota, then you have to assume some operational risk. That's just the nature of the beast.
Yep. The ORM. You got to do it.
All right, let me finish with the rest of the chair's quote here.
In that regard,
so he's asking the Secretary of the Navy the results of his 45-day review.
The contributing factors that were discovered in that review are leadership issues, design maturity, first-of-class challenges faced by the shipyards as well, transition to production, design workforce, and a shortage of blue-collar labor across the country as well.
I just got to pause it there because the U.S. has more shipyard workers than Japan. So I don't want to fucking hear it. There's not a shortage of blue-collar labor.
Also determined that shipyards simply aren't making enough of a contribution on their own to increasing their own production rates at their own shipyards, which is also critical. I mean, it's just one example, Mr. Chairman. We're making a $15 billion investment over the course of the next 5 years that's money that's the taxpayers' money. And at the same time, many of these shipyards are actually making stock buyback programs where they're buying back stacks to the tune of $4 billion and upwards of that. That's unforgivable. We need them to invest in their own shipyards just as much as the American taxpayer is investing in the budget to get these production lines back up.
Well, I would just say that, Eisenhower warned of the military-industrial complex. The fact of the matter is that they're an important partner for us. They're an important part of the equation. And I get it, excuses are many, whether it's workforce or whatever it is. But the fact that some of these corporations are using the money to buy stocks back without building capacity first is incredibly irresponsible. And I hope they're listening, because quite frankly, we will do whatever we can do to make sure they have a workforce, but damn it, they got to step up the plate. And in many cases, I have not seen.
That's like the most beautiful quote I've heard from Congress in a very long time.
Yeah, I mean, look,
that man there is a straight shooter.
I almost completely agree with Senator Tester there. I will say I think it's really funny that he said Eisenhower warned of the military-industrial complex, but fuck it, let's spin that motherfucker up. But otherwise, I completely agree with what he's saying.
So what he did say there, though, and I think it's not just like the shipyard side of it, it's the Navy side of it. And you guys, when we were in the yards, we all experienced it. Those fucking days when you show up for duty. Initially we had that like noon turnover.
Yeah.
Which now looking back kind of makes a little bit more sense.
I'm going to kick you off the podcast for saying that.
Right? So here's the reason I say this.
Should we mute him?
This isn't a good reason, but in terms of production, it did work more. And why I say that is because think of when we switched back to 6:30 or 7 o'clock.
Yeah.
So now the shipyard side, right? For those of you who don't know, they have 2 shifts, they have 3 shifts, and they're working the whole time. So they have these guys working 8 hours. Meanwhile, the Navy has the same group of people working the entire time. And sometimes that went 3 shifts. Sometimes you were working until 2 in the morning.
Yes.
You woke up at 4 in the morning to get fucking ready for work, go to work, and then you get to work and you stay and watch all day. And then when you're not on watch, you're doing fucking test procedures to like retest these systems that they didn't work on. And then you go back on watch, and then you get off watch again. And now you're at like a fucking 20-hour day.
Not only that, but when you're on watch, they are fucking needle gunning beside you.
Yeah.
Yes.
So you're like losing your fucking mind. So now like the production level, because we talk about production, like these guys come on board and go into the fucking engine room or work on the reactor on a submarine and we don't do anything. No, it's like we have to support them at all times in the Navy. So now you have these shipyards who can't produce the results that they actually do want.
Yeah, of course they do. But no one wants
because the Navy doesn't support it.
Yeah, I guess.
So take what you had in reactor control division, say electrical division, triple that number.
Right.
What happens to production?
Goes up.
It goes up a lot because that was I feel like the major theme is the Navy could not support the plan.
Yeah,
so
that's not
it's
unfair.
really easy to just say fuck you shipyard, you guys are the problem, but the Navy's not producing. So like we may boost the numbers a little bit. We'll add 2 more guys to a division when we go into the shipyard. But if we're going to look internally in the Navy, like we cannot support that because one of our major goals in the Navy.
But this is what I'm talking about. Is like the Navy has built this system where they rely on so many administrative and burdensome processes to get work done instead of this elaborate, innovative, and inclusive test process at the end where shit happens so much more slowly because it's like, oh, well, now we actually need all of ship's force to be in shift work to support this test procedure we wrote. Well, fucking why? Just build the fucking thing, fix whatever's wrong, and then figure out how to test it at the end. But they can't do that. They rely on certifications and standards instead. And so the process just trudges along so fucking slowly. And it's brutal for the shipyard workers and ship's force to try to like adhere to that process.
Yeah, and I think that process is archaic. Like, we are locked in this old school, like, draconic path of,
I mean,
like,
yeah, we have fucking World War II shipyard. Well, that's not even fair. Portsmouth Naval Shipyard was open in what, 1700? I mean, it's fucking crazy. It's crazy how old this shit is.
Yeah. Right. So it's we do have these processes that we don't improve upon. We're just stuck in our ways.
Right. And hopefully, I mean, the Navy says that they are attacking that. I have one last video slide of Lindsey Graham, Senator Lindsey Graham from South Carolina, got his few minutes as part of this panel to speak. And here's how it went.
Let's go, South Carolina.
There was a report done in June of last year called the Battle Force.
This is the report that I mentioned earlier. This is the one that is still classified and not formally endorsed by anybody, but it says they need 381 ships.
BFSAR. Are you familiar with that, Admiral?
Yes.
Okay.
Battle Force Structure Assessment Report.
There you go. We got one acronym down and many to go, I'm sure. It said we needed 381 manned ships and 150 unmanned platforms for a total of 515. Is that accurate?
Okay. I'm just going to say this because it drives me fucking nuts for the next 5 minutes. That's not how that math works out.
That math isn't mathing.
381 and 150 is 531, but he keeps saying 515. So I don't know if the report is wrong or if he has bad numbers, but I just wanted to say that because it drives me fucking nuts.
Yeah, I already got that.
South Carolina, man.
Yeah, that's true. He's from South Carolina. And I think he was an Air Force guy, too, for what it's worth.
I think he still is. He's a
really every study since 2016
State Air Force
has said that we need larger Navy.
We need 515. How many do we have now in terms of ships?
We have 293 ships today.
Okay.
And we are continuing to reduce.
How many will we have under this budget in 2030?
In 2030, we will
have 200.
Okay, this is a very small gripe I have, but how do you not know your fucking numbers off the top of your head when you go in front of the Senate to talk about how many ships you'll have at the end of your fucking budget? Like, that's crazy.
Again, going into the skipper's office unprepared.
Yes, exactly.
194 ships.
4 ships, yes.
Okay. We're going to have one more ship than we have today in 2030. We got a long way to go to get to 373. What does it take to build out this 515 platform Navy in terms of spending?
So first of all, on the numbers, it's not only about the numbers, Senator Graham, it's also about the capabilities.
No, wait a
And we
minute.
need to have
No. You said numbers. You didn't. The report said 515. It said 381 manned ships and 150 unmanned. Are those numbers right?
Yes, those numbers are correct.
Apart from capability. Don't put out a report that's false. If these numbers are not accurate because we have capability to do it with half of that, I need to know right now.
Senator, the ship...
I'm not talking to you.
Yes, that is our analysis that it was done last year that reported that out in the Battle Force Structure Assessment Review.
So you stick by these numbers, right?
We will continue to do that.
Okay, all right, you're telling us what you think you need.
Yes.
So we got a budget that gets us to 294 in 2030. Now, Mr. Secretary, you support this budget?
I do support this budget.
Do you support the plan to get to 515 ships?
By 2043, sir.
You support that plan?
I do support the profile, the number one profile that we submitted in the shipbuilding plan.
Okay, so how in the hell do we get there? If you support, I'll
be happy to.
I'll get right to you. I'm
I'd be
talking.
happy to explain how we get there, sir.
Huh?
I'd be happy to explain how.
Okay, how do we get there, real quick?
We get there by having continued support from the Congress, basically, without.
How much money do you need?
And the Fiscal Responsibility Act actually has made it difficult this year to be able to invest.
Admiral Gidley said.
However, but if
I am talking. Okay. Admiral Gidley said last year, you need 5% above inflation to get there, according to this plan.
And the Congress passed the Fiscal Responsibility
Yeah,
Act.
well, I'm not saying we're not at fault.
Of the budget.
So we're 1% above last year's numbers, right?
That's correct.
Okay. Last year's numbers were 1% above. We're still below inflation.
No, last year's number actually were quite significantly higher than the.
We're 1% over last year's number because of the Fiscal Accountability Act. You don't agree with that?
That's correct.
Okay. Well, what's inflation?
Inflation runs at about 3.4% right now.
So we're spending below inflation. Can we agree on that?
That's correct.
Okay, so if it takes 5% over inflation to get to this magic number, this year we're spending below inflation. And when you project it out, the number of ships we'll have in an inventory we're not the enemy here. Goes to 294. Where does China go by 2030, Admiral? How many ships will China have?
It's projected to have about 430 ships.
Yeah, how many do they have now? 395.
Around 370.
Okay, they have 395 now. That's what this chart says. Maybe it's 370. Let's say it's 370. They have 435, we think, by 2030. We're going up one ship. They're going up like a bunch. There is no plan to the public out there. I trust you about the 515. I'm not arguing with you. I think you know what the hell you're talking about. I'm not arguing with you that we should have more money. I'm just saying we're saying one thing and doing another. The responsibility falls on elected officials. But I would like y'all to echo what I'm saying. I'd like y'all to legitimize that my concerns are real. I'm just not making this shit up. That we talk about a Navy to confront threats that are growing, and our budgets do not meet the needs of this country by a factor of a bunch. And it's going to take bipartisan effort to get with the program. What I want the country to know is that we're on course to shrink the Navy as China is increasing the Navy. The budgets we have do not get us anywhere near where the experts say we need. So what you can do for this country, I think all of you, is just tell us the truth, that we're on track not to meet our goals. Is that true, Admiral?
So we have about 86 ships on contract right now, 55 under construction. There's 57 in this budget. One of the things that we need to do as a nation is invest in our shipbuilding.
How many are we going to retire?
We're retiring 19, 9 at their.
Well, so in 2030, if we're at 294 and today we're 293, we just gained one ship. Is that right?
Yep, that is correct.
Okay, well, that's my point. By 2030, we have like one more ship than we have today, and we need 380-something of these things, and we're going backward, not forward.
I can't lie. I love the old man.
Politics aside, he is fucking right. What he's saying is totally
He's
valid.
on par.
And to Danny's point earlier, if the Navy leadership would come out and fucking be real and paint the true picture of what exists, it takes all the steam out of his politicking because you own it. But because you don't and you spew a bunch of fucking false bullshit, then Lindsey Graham needs to come up and smash you and make you look like a fucking idiot because you look like a fucking idiot.
That's what's so ironic about the whole situation is it's the fucking Navy's current motto. Like our number one goal right now, like is this taboo culture that we've created. And real. I think the idea behind it, because there's some great people who have come out from really the last 20 years, specifically the SEAL community, about leadership because they experienced it firsthand. And we're experiencing it now. But get real, get better. Like, how do we set this as our motto?
Yeah, I mean, when the Secretary of the Navy, the CNO,
the issues that we have,
when they present to Congress like that, get real. No, no one's getting real. They're getting political, and they're just spewing bullshit, dude. When Lindsey Graham can step into a committee hearing look at one report from a year ago and make you look like a fucking asshole, you're not getting real.
Yeah.
And he's right.
And he shouldn't be the one that's able to do that. Right? He's not even trying to break it down.
Yes.
He's not trying to break it down. He's just looking at the paper and being like, hey, look, this is not matching what you're saying.
And like he says that we're shrinking the Navy, which we're not. It's not going to shrink. It's going to grow. But what he's saying is still valid, which is that you are pretending that this budget will get you to this goal, which you haven't even formally endorsed until this fucking hearing. And it fucking isn't.
And then the other side of it is the only thing he's saying is like, tell me what you need so I can get it to you.
Exactly. He's like, I know really that it's our fault. I know that we passed the Fiscal Responsibility Act and it caps defense spending. But like, besides that, what is the fucking number? We don't know. We're just going to need continued congressional support. Dude, fuck off. What is the fucking number?
I need the number.
Yeah,
baby.
so that's what I did respect about that is like he acknowledged like, hey, we're fucking up too.
And
yeah.
That's step one. Like if we want to get better as a Navy and grow and produce, great. But there's another problem they don't acknowledge, and we talked about it earlier, but I kind of didn't dive into it. Right now, if we can continue projections for recruiting the people side of the Navy, which is the most important fucking part.
Yeah. So I have that on
these ships that we want to project.
Yeah, I have that on this slide. So I broke down I want to be solution focused, and I broke down this slide into what the Navy says that they're doing, and that is a giant fucking grain of salt that you have to take this with. This is what the Navy says they're doing versus what they are not doing or haven't mentioned. So the things that they say they are doing is modernizing tools and processes as part of the SIOP, the Shipyard Infrastructure Optimization Program. They are agglomerating and staging long lead time materials. So things that would normally delay production because they have to outsource it to who fucking knows where and then ship it in. They're supposedly staging all those materials and having some sort of rotating system. And then innovating and optimizing shipyard infrastructure. Okay, got it. That's what they say they're going to do. But what no one is fucking talking about is these things. Subsidizing the shipbuilding industry to catch up to foreign competitors, taking steps to increase the labor force, which I would argue is not even necessary, but they mention it. Providing clear information about challenges because they aren't fucking saying that there's a problem or at least not saying what the problem is. They're saying, yeah, we know we're assessing the problem. We have data analytics. Like, okay, what is the fucking problem and what are you going to do about it? They don't maintain realistic goals at all. And this is clear from the beginning of the Trump administration, from the 355 ship Navy goal, which everybody endorsed and then everybody realized wasn't going to work, but no one had any fucking better ideas. Simplifying the ship design and specializing shipyards, which we can get into if we want, but that model has worked since World War II, and I don't know why the fuck we haven't done it. Reestablishing Navy-owned shipyards, which, Danny, you mentioned this before also, and then addressing the manning issue. Senator Collins said it, the co-chair of this committee said it in her second question to the panel. There's 22,000 gaps in sea billets, and you want to increase the number of ships by almost 100. Who in the fuck is going to man those ships?
That was my sentiment earlier. It's like, why not retire these old ships that aren't doing anything to make new ones to fill the billets? Because you already don't have the people.
Yeah, and what they say is our research says that we need this many ships, and the reason for that, and I didn't really cover this, but they pivoted from the short war mindset of the 70s and 80s into a dual front mindset. So the idea was the Navy needs to be big enough to be able to fight two simultaneous full-scale wars on two separate fronts. And all of the research from the 2000s and 2010s and 2020s says this is how many ships you need. And that number is 381. And so that is this unofficial classified goal that they will not be able to man because they can't man 294 or 293.
Well, the thing about it is if we go to a full-scale war, we just go back to a draft. That's the fact of the matter, right? Like, people will join the forces because they will have to join the forces, right? We are on the fringe of what I feel like could be a two-front war. Like, we could be there.
Yes.
I don't know when that is going to be, but
I agree with you. But their posture is maintain readiness for a two-front war.
Yeah.
And that means having 381 manned ships and supposedly 150 unmanned ships. Okay, well, where the fuck is the manning?
Yeah.
It's not there. And this is a separate podcast altogether. But you cannot pretend that if tomorrow the Navy somehow managed to have their goal of 381 ships, who the fuck is on board?
For me, I mean, obviously it's a combination with the manning thing. It is a recruiting thing, obviously. It's also a retention thing. On the recruiting side of the house, I do think that there is a less of a propensity to enlist on our side of the house because, I mean, the fact of the matter is, like, kids right now, they can get on TikTok and monetize themselves, right?
Look,
like
I don't
think
want
TikTok is
I don't want it to be about
detriment.
recruiting, but like they don't even mention the fact that, like, if the CNO and the SecNav came out and said, look, we know that the research says that we need 381 ships. Currently we have 293. We're going to get to 294, but we realize that we have a manning problem, and we are going to build our budget to only facilitate the amount of personnel that we have and expect to have in the near future. Fine, that's totally reasonable.
Yeah.
But they don't even fucking talk about the fact that they can't fill 293 ships worth of billets, let alone 90 more.
Yeah, that's what I find really ironic in the whole conversation is that right now in the Navy, the number one priority is retention and
recruiting,
like accessions, getting people to join the Navy and getting people to stay in the Navy. That's the number one priority, and it's not even fucking brought up because we're talking about 293 ships.
Yeah,
we're struggling to man 293 ships.
Exactly.
Like massively
and
struggling.
They have it. They have it right there as this like easy out. Like, yes, we're not going to meet our goal, but our goal needs to change because we can't man that many ships. But they don't say it. They say, oh, we have systemic problems and we're investigating and we're going to, pump a bunch of money into the shipyards. Who's going to man your ships?
I'll say this. My XO says basically when the Navy gives you a mission and they say, hey, this is the primary mission of the Navy, there is no ability to say I failed, right? You must accomplish this mission. So they're not going to say that they're failing it. They're not going to hint at failing it.
Right.
They're not going to say anything about it. They're going to say, hey, we're strong, fast. We're going to head on this thing and we're going to do it. Right. And that's how they operate.
You're right. Because if the CNO came out and said, we can't man this many ships, guess who's fired?
Instantaneously.
Yeah. You're right. I mean, yes, I agree that politics play a part, but when you layer in the current infrastructure with the manning problems, with the way that they present to Congress, like it's not any better than them just owning the fucking issue.
Yeah.
So
go ahead.
So because I want to talk about the two of what the Navy Congress is not doing, right?
Okay.
One, subsidizing.
Yeah.
That's the Navy can't control it. Like the military is given a budget and they talked very briefly about it. And they're like, yeah, we gave you this budget and we capped discretionary funding.
Yeah.
If you can't get to that budget, whatever that magical number needs to be, what, like your hands are tied. What do you do?
Well, so that
from the
that
military
point,
side, like, from the
yeah,
Navy.
exactly. That point is about that transcends the military. That's about subsidizing the shipbuilding industry to help fix all these other problems. Like, hey, we can't compete with Korea and China because we only have this many shipyards. But if we subsidize the whole industry, then all of a sudden, instead of having 2 fucking companies to choose from to produce submarines, maybe we'll have 6. And maybe they get produced faster and cheaper and better.
Cool. And then to build into that, because actually at the very beginning of that video that we did not cover, it's like 10 minutes in, ranking member Adam Smith actually talks about, because he's from Washington State.
Right.
He represents what is it? Bangor?
Yeah.
Up in Washington.
Puget
right.
Sound.
And he was talking about I guess there's like a movement or people are discussing or however long it's coming of like trade schools and high schools that dedicate people to learn the craft of shipbuilding, right?
Okay.
We have dedicated pipelines to train people to do it, because something he talks about is one, the lack of the training for it and the deficiency that currently exists of training and knowledge on the shipbuilding side, right? because it has stagnated and
So not to keep coming back to this, but that same EB employee I talked to, he said there's a ton of older engineers that know everything, but the knowledge transfer isn't really there. So when that wave retires, there's going to be some struggle, which there's already some struggle based on that current knowledge gap, but it's going to get worse.
Yeah. Well, because he was saying, one, we provide an infrastructure of getting people into that, right? It's not necessarily a job guarantee program, but it's like that's the point of like going to college, just to learn how to do a job. Well, you can go to this trade school to learn how to do this job, right?
Yeah.
It's something, right? It is a tangible plan.
Yeah, that's another idea.
And he goes a little bit more about like we need to reform immigration so we can increase our blue collar workforce.
Dude, I literally had a thought when I was putting the slide together of like take all the immigrants that you've detained and put them into temporary employment opportunities at shipyards, but I didn't even want to bring it up. It's like such a fucking controversial point.
He doesn't go too deep into it, but he basically just says the way we solve this is to grow our blue collar workforce.
Yeah, maybe. But Japan does it with less. They produce 20 times more than us.
I'm going to tell you that those people would probably that would be the fucking American dream opportunity.
Yeah.
That being said, what I think on the civilian side of the shipyard is it needs to be incentivized more. We see how it gets incentivized in the Navy. These bonuses we're getting now, they're gigantic.
Right.
$100,000+ routinely, right? You can get that 3 times in a row. You can join the nuclear Navy and make $75,000 as an enlistment bonus, and then 2 years later re-enlist for $85,000. Then 4 years after that, re-enlist for $160,000. Like, it's insane.
Yeah.
Right? So, but on the shipyard side of it, it is the level of stress and the level of like what it takes from you is equivalent, and it's hard to imagine that, but it is. It's very equivalent.
Yeah, and that's another government issue. Like there is the privately owned shipyards that have their own issues, but there's also the repair yards that are government employees that run it.
Yeah, and the difference in pay between the private entities, Electric Boat, and the public shipyards is drastic. Like,
right.
The guys at these private yards are making a lot more.
Yeah.
But the job itself is still like it takes a lot from you.
Yeah, I don't think their retention is much better. It might even be worse than the military in general. Like that employee I talked to from EB is a former employee
for a reason. Yeah, for a very good reason.
Yeah,
and they have their own manning issues as well.
Right. Yeah, I mean, we're never going to compete with Asian culture as far as like the way that they execute the job.
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is they're outproducing us by 20 times with a smaller workforce. Like, all right, something else is wrong. Okay, I think we covered it. Unless anyone wants to say something else, ready to move on, play some games. All right, let's do it. All right, back from our last break. We're going to play our mid-watch games, 50-50-90, in a hypothetical situation. So we'll start with 50-50-90. If you're a good nuke, you will get more than 10% of these questions correct. So far, we have passed with flying colors. Everybody except me lost the last episode, so, fucking come get your king. All right, Amber, let it rip.
Okay, so on my screen, it's Joe, Jimmy, Danny, and Kenny. So we'll go in that order.
Hell yeah, always first.
I love it.
I know you do.
This is why I won last time. We got to go last.
Convenient.
Well, then switch it up.
Nope.
Inconvenient.
Okay, all right. You ready, Joe?
Always ready.
What's the diameter of a basketball hoop in inches? 16 or 18?
16. Oh, wait. NBA or college? Does it matter? I don't know. 16.
It's the same fucking everywhere, dude.
I don't know.
I don't know the number, but I know it's the same everywhere.
All right. Joe says 16.
18.
18.
16.
It is 18.
I
picked 16 because that would be harder to make. So
It would be harder to make, but it also would be damn near the same size as a fucking basketball.
That's the ones you play at the carnival. Those ones are 16
Yeah,
and oval.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay, number 2. What's the national sport of Canada? Lacrosse or hockey?
Hockey.
Hockey.
It's lacrosse. I know it is.
It's lacrosse.
Lacrosse? Dude, fuck
What?
Canada. Why is it not hockey?
Sorry.
Number 3. How many dimples does an average golf ball have? 313 or 336?
336.
313.
336.
336.
336?
Finally, goddamn.
Tied up, Kenny.
But why?
Why what? Ken?
Ask Titleist. I have no
Yeah,
idea.
because Taylor made and Titleist fucking said so, dude.
Okay, who has won more tennis Grand Slams, Venus or Serena?
It's easy. Joe, you don't know this?
Serena.
It is Serena.
Serena by a lot.
Yes.
Okay. If you gave me a picture of both of them, I couldn't tell you which one. I don't fucking know.
Wow, that's crazy.
Uh-oh.
Venus Williams is only famous because she was older. Like, Serena was way fucking better.
Okay. I thought
Well,
they
she
were
was
like
first.
Not a 50-50-90 on the picture.
I thought they were like both like tip top. So like,
Dude,
I
Joe
don't
would
know.
probably say, "Oh, that one's Jada Pinkett Smith."
Venus
my
was
God.
because she was like 14 when she made her first, or made it to her first major.
Yeah, Venus was the older sister, but like Serena came in dominated.
Hot.
Okay.
Yeah, the difference was that I think it was Venus was first.
Yeah.
Fuck you. I know what Jada Pinkett Smith looks like.
G.I. Jane, right?
Yeah.
Oh. Keep my wife's name out your fucking mouth.
Oh my god.
Dude,
Oh
that's
my
such a
God.
sick movie.
All right,
I
Joe.
don't want to get hit by Will Smith. That's why I said that. So.
Yeah, that's true.
Number 5. How many losses does Muhammad Ali have in his career? 3 or 5?
Fuck. I don't know shit about boxing. 5. At least one. Joe Frazier. I know that.
I want to say it's 3.
3.
5.
It's
I
5.
think he's 40. I thought he was. Is he 50-5 or is he 49? I thought he was 49-3. I could be thinking about somebody else.
Okay.
I could be
Don't
thinking
ask
about
me shit
Rocky
about boxing.
Marciano.
I did look it up. It's like I think it's like 51-5. You can
51-5.
check. I think you can check
knew
it
that.
later, but I don't remember exactly.
You gotta
how many
ask me
wins.
MMA stuff. I don't know shit about boxing.
Well, bad news. No MMA tonight. Next time. Number 6. A sporting event is held every year on Memorial Day. Is it the Kentucky Derby or the Indianapolis 500?
It's a good question.
It is.
The Kentucky Derby. I don't know anything about either of those.
Jimmy?
I'm gonna go to the Derby too.
Me too.
Indy 500.
It's the India 500. Kentucky Derby just happened.
Yep, in early May.
Oh,
You can't sit mint juleps in fucking late May, dude.
oh my god,
Oh,
he gives a fuck.
I only said the Derby because my my realtor she had a party for one of her friends who's going to be the provost in Kentucky.
The what?
And the provost, like for the school, it's like
What does
a
that mean?
academic. It's like an academic thing. It's like
Okay.
academia. They like design the curriculum for the school,
Okay.
but she's going to do that, and they had a Derby party for her. So I was like, oh,
Yeah, but
maybe-
Memorial Day hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, but it's coming.
It's way later. It's like 2 weeks, 2 or 3 weeks from now.
Yeah, so
All right, next one.
moving.
What number sets to the right of the number 20 on a standard dartboard? 1 or 5?
Where is 20 the tip top?
Yes.
Shit. 1.
I also say 1.
5.
It's 1.
It's 1.
5 is the left. It's 9 o'clock position.
All right, shut up, nerd. Nobody asked.
Yeah.
I would notice because I've been playing darts to go home every day at work.
You got to double out?
No, so we've been doing it on. It's actually a cork board with the when you go shoot guns, the fucking setup for that. So we're doing it on that.
You throw darts at a human silhouette.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's an Always Sunny game.
Oh yeah, true. Don't flinch.
Yeah,
right?
don't flinch.
Yeah.
It's what I do to go home. So.
All right, number 8. How old was Tiger Woods when he won his first Masters? 20 or 21?
20.
20.
It's more impressive.
21.
I know that he won in 1997. I don't know when he was born, so I'm gonna say 20.
He's 21.
21.
21?
And then he said, well, hello world.
Okay. Who was the first president to throw the ceremonial first pitch at a Major League Baseball game? William Howard Taft
Dude, it's so fucking
or
hard.
Woodrow Wilson? The last
Woodrow
ones have
Wilson.
been so easy.
I know. I'm saying this is good. These are like true 50.
It's gotta be Woodrow Wilson. Taft was fat as fuck. No way he could throw it.
Taft or Wilson?
What was the question?
Who was the first president to throw the ceremonial first pitch at an MLB game? William Howard Taft or Woodrow Wilson?
Woodrow Wilson. Taft was so big. No, they had to make a new bathtub for that motherfucker.
Yeah.
Which is exactly why I'm going to go with Taft based on the time.
I'm so bad at presidents.
Well, I mean,
Joe's really good at them. I'll say Woodrow Wilson.
It was Taft.
Oh shit!
God,
the timing is right, like late 1800s, early 1900s.
Yeah, it was like 1907 or something. 1920.
Yeah, he came right before Wilson, but I was like, he's too fat. Like he can't throw that shit.
He probably threw a fucking heater, dude. Like what was that Mets pitcher?
Oh, it was 1910. It was 1910.
Someone knows the fucking fat Mets pitcher.
I know you're talking about it.
Pillsbury Throwsbury.
God damn.
The what? Did you say that again?
The Pillsbury Throwsbury.
He's a Spanish guy.
Battleship Lorenzen. I don't know.
Dominican probably, but all right, I'll put him in post.
All right, last question.
Roberto Colon. Colon. Is that right?
Ooh,
he was fat.
Yeah.
Roberto Colon. He's still pitching in Mexico.
He is?
Yes.
Holy shit.
You're right. What NFL team was originally called the New York Titans? The New York Jets or the Tennessee Titans?
The Jets. Jets.
I'll go with the Jets also.
Jets.
It's the Jets.
It's the Jets.
Yeah. The Tennessee Titans are from Houston.
Oilers, correct.
The Oilers.
Okay, that was it.
Okay, we'll find out who won. Whoever won will get the nice green cool numbers, and then whoever lost will get the drippy red numbers of shame. And
I think I got like 3 right.
Kenny, you won. Joe, you lost.
Probably.
We'll find out.
Kenny, you beat me by 1.
Oh, you were keeping track?
Yeah, it's
all right. Cool.
Every time we've done this during the show, it's been incorrect.
That is true. Last week, both you and Amber were like, Dakota, you lost, and he hadn't lost.
Sorry, Dakota.
But he also said he lost. He was like, I had to go all in because I lost.
Okay, I have a hypothetical question for everyone. Who do you want to go reverse order or just the same?
Sure.
Okay. If you could turn your belly button into an actual button, what would its purpose be?
Ooh. That's a really good question.
I got an answer. It's not a good one, but I got an answer.
Okay, go ahead. I think you're the only one that does so far.
All right.
So.
It's not a button, but I'm cheating. But the battle short. On the side. That was the first thing that came to mind.
Like the battle short of a human body or the actual battle short switch?
No, the
That'd be
battle
cool,
short
but-
of a submarine. A random submarine. Just press it.
You send so many people to mass for that?
Battle short of a human body would be nuts.
Yeah, it would. It'd be like doing
Yeah,
coke.
I'm turning off all limits. Yeah.
That's what's that fucking movie with Bradley Cooper?
Limitless.
That's not actually how it works, by the way, but I'm
No.
just going to assume that it's like
I don't even know if I would explain what it is. I don't know if I can actually legally explain what the battle shorts.
You can't.
Okay, so I won't.
It just makes things more better. Mo better.
Yeah.
Mo better. That's
Mo
right.
better.
Mo boat, go mo faster.
Mo boat.
Yeah. The only thing you need to know is you don't activate that shit. Well, it's a switch. It's not a button. But if you activate it, you're probably getting kicked out of the Navy.
Yeah.
Dog, they say that thing linked up to NAVC, homie.
I mean, I've operated it, but not under operational circumstances.
Yeah.
All right, who wants to go next?
Ooh.
Me.
Okay. I thought you had an answer.
Go. What are you doing?
Oh, I thought you were asking a new question.
No, that was the question. That is the question.
Jimmy's gone.
I don't know. I think if I had a button on my belly button. No, I can't say that. I can't.
Okay, let's hear it, and we'll decide if you can't say that.
If you want me to cut it out later, I'll cut it out later.
I was gonna say I'll push the button on my belly button to piss out of old fashioned.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. So this is my answer. I want my belly button to be like one of those new Coke machines where you can pick like any drink, any flavor, and then just dispense it right out your dick. That's my answer. I want cherry vanilla Fanta on tap whenever the fuck I want.
How do you drink it?
See, in a cup.
Preferred method.
What do you think?
Yeah,
I don't. Hey man, maybe if you were cooler, you would like
There you
go
go.
straight from the
There you
tap.
go. I was about to say from the.
I'll get a couple. If I get a belly button that's a new Coke machine, I'll get a couple of ribs removed so I can get it straight from the tap.
Yeah, so when I thought of this, I thought of two things. One was a literal like button on a shirt, and then the second one, I went to straight like superpowers. Like, oh, maybe I think of it like a button that turns something on. So
yeah,
the first one was like for me, I think I'm like special, but it's like, what could I use a button on my belly button for?
It's like a clothing button.
Yeah, now I have shirt stays installed. Like what
shirt stays.
And then I was like, no, I'm gonna go with superpowers because that's way more cool. And it would be my invisible button. I'd disappear.
That's really good.
Just run around naked all the time, but nobody would know until I accidentally hit my belly button in the middle of a business conference.
Right.
Whoops.
Jimmy, are you sticking with old fashioned?
Yeah, I'm going to old fashioned, man. It was a good idea.
All right, Amber, what do you pick?
I like Kenny's.
Yeah. Finally.
No way. It's almost
were
like you two were married.
You were a close
win.
second.
My first
Kenny,
win.
Or you were a close second, Danny.
For which one? The shirt stay?
Yeah. Superpower specifically, not necessarily invisibility, but
I keep forgetting that you're supposed to pick like the best one. Now you just pick which one do I think I would be like? Do I like the most?
I mean, there's nothing wrong with that.
So what I remember is Kenny hates Cards Against Humanity, but he does
do.
love winning this game. So like
I love winning. I love winning Cards Against Humanity. I just hate playing it.
you know,
I like winning.
We did make him play not too long ago, and I was kicking ass, and he couldn't stand it.
Of course you were. He sucks at it. It's
That
okay.
game sucks. All right, episode 4 in the books. Thanks everybody for joining, and we'll call it an episode there.
Bye.
See you next week.
Dive. Code red in 4 compartment middle level.
Torpedoes in the water!
No, I never have thought I was smart. I thought the people I dealt with were dumb, including you.